Being the best in the world at climbing should keep you alive. Years of training, thousands of hours of experience, the finest equipment ever made. None of it mattered on these mountains. They didn't just kill good climbers. They killed legends who survived storms that destroyed expeditions and rewrote the rules of the death zone. But when the best go down, everything changes. These are the mountains that proved skill has a limit, and these are the stories of exactly how they died. Number 10. Cho Oyu, the deceptive giant. Moving to our 10th entry, we have a mountain that many consider the easiest of the 8,000-meter peaks. Cho Oyu, the sixth highest peak at 8,188 meters on the Nepal-Tibet border, has the lowest fatality rate of all 14 8,000ers at roughly 1.2%. But easiest is a dangerous word in the death zone. The standard northwest route is broad and gradual, demanding more endurance than technical skill. Just endless white slopes and the slow grinding work of putting one foot in front of the other at extreme altitude. In 2013, highly experienced Slovak climber Peter Hammer died on Cho Oyu while retracing his steps towards safety after summiting. Hammer had already summited several 8,000-meter peaks and was known for thorough planning. Yet somewhere on those easy slopes, exhaustion, thin air, and freezing winds compounded into a lethal combination. What Hammer's death revealed is a fundamental truth. There is no such thing as an easy 8,000-meter peak. Every step above that threshold is a gamble with physics, weather, and human physiology. Number 9. Nanga Parbat, the killer mountain. We start with a mountain that doesn't even crack the top 10 highest peaks on Earth, but has earned a reputation so lethal that even elite mountaineers approach it with more trepidation than Everest. This is Nanga Parbat, the 9th highest peak at 8,126 meters in Pakistan's western Himalayas. With roughly 20% of climbers who attempt it never coming back, it stands as one of the most lethal challenges in mountaineering. The mountain's reputation was built on tragedy from the very beginning. Before 1953, Nanga Parbat had already claimed 31 lives across multiple German expeditions, earning it the nickname the German Grave. But the death that changed everything happened in 1970, and it involved two brothers who were rewriting the historic history of Himalayan climbing. Günther and Reinhold Messner were among the most accomplished climbers of their generation. Reinhold would go on to become the first person to climb all 14 8,000ers and the first to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. But in June 1970, they were part of a German expedition attempting a new route on Nanga Parbat's Rupel Face. The Rupel Face is one of the largest vertical walls on Earth, rising more than 4,000 meters from base to summit. On June 27th, Reinhold and Günther made a lightning-fast push for the summit, moving so quickly they left the rest of their team behind. They reached the top in the afternoon, but immediately faced a critical problem. Günther was showing severe signs of altitude sickness. Reinhold made a decision that mountaineers still debate today. Instead of retreating down the known route, they would descend the opposite side of the mountain, down the Diamir Face, a route they had never seen before. They spent the night high on the mountain without shelter, without food, without equipment. The next day they continued down, exhausted and desperate. And then, on the lower slopes, disaster struck. A massive avalanche swept down the mountain. Reinhold survived. Günther didn't. What happened next became one of the most controversial episodes in mountaineering history. Reinhold descended alone, suffering from severe frostbite and hallucinations. When he reached civilization, teammates accused Reinhold of prioritizing the summit over his brother, though he maintained the descent was a desperate necessity. For 35 years, Günther's body was never found. Then, in 2005, climbers discovered human remains on the Diamir Face. DNA testing confirmed it was Günther Messner. The location proved Reinhold's account. They had descended together, and Günther had died in an avalanche exactly as Reinhold described. Nanga Parbat had taken one of the world's best climbers and left his brother to carry the weight of that death for decades. Number 8. Broad Peak, the exhausting giant rising. 8,051 meters into the thin air of northern Pakistan, Broad Peak is the 12th highest mountain in the world. Around 445 climbers have reached its summit, while about 40 have lost their lives, giving it a fatality rate of around 9%. The climb isn't extremely technical, but it demands endurance, a never-ending ridge at extreme altitude where every gust of wind feels like it could knock you into oblivion. In 2013, renowned Hungarian climber Zsolt Eros died on Broad Peak during the grueling return through the upper ridge. Eros had already summited 10 of the 14 8,000-meter peaks and had lost all 10 toes to frostbite on a previous expedition, yet continued climbing with prosthetics. His determination and skill were legendary. On July 21st, Eros reached the summit but collapsed on the way down. Despite rescue attempts, he died at approximately 7,400 meters. Broad Peak had proven that even climbers who had overcome the loss of their toes could be defeated by exhaustion and altitude. Number 7. Lhotse, Everest's deadly shadow. The fourth highest mountain on Earth, at 8,516 meters, Lhotse stands right beside Mount Everest, sharing the same base camp before branching off into its own deadly couloir near the top. With around 1,000 successful summits and about 20 recorded deaths, Lhotse's fatality rate is close to 2%. Despite sharing infrastructure with Everest, Lhotse does not get the fame or crowds. But in terms of pure climbing difficulty, many say it is actually harder. The route is steep, icy, and constantly bombarded by falling rock. In 2015, Swiss climber Ueli Steck, widely considered one of the greatest alpinists of his generation, was preparing to attempt a new route on the Everest-Lhotse Traverse. The Swiss machine was known for his record-breaking speed and surgical precision on peaks like the Eiger and Annapurna. In 2017, while acclimatizing for the Traverse, Steck fell to his death on the slopes of Lhotse, a peak near Lhotse. He was 40 years old. The climbing community was stunned. Steck represented the pinnacle of alpine climbing. His death on what should have been a routine acclimatization climb demonstrated how a single moment can erase decades of experience. Number 6. Manaslu, the Mountain of the Spirit. Manaslu, the 8th highest mountain on Earth at 8,163 meters, stands in the central Himalayas of Nepal. With over 2,000 summits and more than 100 recorded deaths, Manaslu's fatality rate sits around 5.7%. The route isn't technically extreme, but what makes Manaslu lethal is its unpredictability. Unstable seracs and shifting ice formations mean the mountain's character changes from one day to the next. Climbers who study route photos from previous seasons often find those routes no longer exist. In September 2012, Manaslu produced one of the deadliest avalanches in Himalayan history. Early in the morning, a massive serac collapsed at Camp 3, triggering an avalanche that swept through the camp while climbers were sleeping. 11 people were killed, including several highly experienced mountaineers. Among the dead was Fabrice Imperato, a French climber attempting his 6th 8,000-meter peak. Also killed was Gilles Mermelot, another experienced French mountaineer. The wall of snow and ice possessed a kinetic force that no amount of technical skill could resist. The 2012 disaster highlighted Manaslu's fundamental danger. The mountain looks peaceful from afar, but its ice formations are constantly shifting. And when they collapse, there's no time to react, no skill that can save you. Number 5. Kangchenjunga, the Mountain of 5 Treasures. At 8,586 meters, Kangchenjunga is the 3rd highest mountain in the world, standing on the border between Nepal and India. It's one of the most sacred peaks in the Himalayas. Since its first ascent in 1955, it has seen fewer than 500 successful summits and over 85 recorded deaths, giving it a fatality rate close to 18%. The mountain is remote, wild, and incredibly dangerous. The approach is long, the weather unstable, and avalanches sweep the slopes without warning. In 2013, Spanish climber Alberto Zarain disappeared on Kangchenjunga during a solo attempt without supplemental oxygen. Zarain was one of Spain's most accomplished high-altitude climbers, having summited 11 8,000-meter peaks, including K2. He was known for his solo climbs and his refusal to use bottled oxygen. Zarain was last seen on the lower slopes with the summit already behind him on May 15th. He never returned to base camp. Despite search efforts, his body was never found. One of Spain's greatest mountaineers had simply vanished into the mountain. Number 4. Makalu, the Great Black Mountain. At 8,485 meters, Makalu is the fifth highest peak on Earth and one of the most striking. Its steep faces and razor-sharp ridges make it one of the most technically difficult 8,000-meter peaks, with around 525 successful ascents and roughly 35 recorded deaths. Makalu's fatality rate sits close to 7%. Even seasoned mountaineers describe it as relentless. The mountain demands precision and punishes hesitation. In 2009, renowned Russian climber Irina Gali died on Makalu during a speed ascent without supplemental oxygen. She reached the summit but died during the push back to high camp, likely from exhaustion and altitude sickness. Her death illustrated a crucial danger. The summit is only halfway. The technical difficulty becomes exponentially more dangerous when climbers are exhausted and oxygen deprived. Number 3. Annapurna, the deadliest mountain on Earth. Annapurna stands 8,091 meters high in central Nepal. It was the first 8,000-meter peak ever climbed, summited in 1950 by Maurice Herzog and Louis Lachenal. But that first ascent nearly killed both of them. Herzog lost all his fingers and toes to frostbite, and Annapurna has been taking lives ever since. With a fatality rate hovering around 30%, it's killed more than 110 climbers out of roughly 365 successful summits. For every 3 people who reach the top, 1 person dies. The danger lies in Annapurna's terrain. Its south face is one of the most avalanche-prone slopes in the Himalayas. Seracs collapse without warning. The weather shifts in minutes. Entire expeditions have been buried in seconds. One of the most devastating losses came in May 2008. Iñaki Ochoa de Lhotse was a Spanish climber with an extraordinary resume. He had summited 11 of the 14 8,000ers, including K2. He was known for climbing without supplemental oxygen and for his deep technical knowledge. Ochoa was attempting the summit via the north face when he collapsed at 7,400 meters, likely suffering from high-altitude pulmonary or cerebral edema. What happened next was one of the most dramatic rescue attempts in Himalayan history. For 48 hours, climbers from multiple expeditions stayed with Ochoa at high altitude, trying to keep him alive while waiting for a helicopter that couldn't reach them due to weather and altitude limits. Among those who stayed was Adurn Pasaban, one of the greatest female mountaineers in history, who abandoned her own summit attempt to help. Eventually, a helicopter managed to reach them, but Ochoa died during the evacuation. But perhaps the most shocking death on Annapurna happened just 3 years later, in October 2011. Park Young-sok was a Korean climbing legend who had completed the True Adventurer's Grand Slam, summiting the highest peak on all 7 continents, reaching both poles, and climbing all 14 8,000ers. Park was attempting a new route on Annapurna's south face when an avalanche struck on October 18th. Park Young-sok and 2 other climbers were swept away. Their bodies were never recovered. South Korea went into mourning. One of their national heroes had been killed by the deadliest mountain on Earth. Number 2. K2, the Savage Mountain. At 8,611 meters, K2 is the second highest mountain in the world, standing in Pakistan's Karakoram range. But in terms of difficulty and danger, many climbers consider it harder than Everest. K2's fatality rate is around 26%, nearly 1 in 4. And unlike Everest, which has become a commercial operation, K2 remains a serious mountaineering objective attempted only by experienced climbers. K2 offers no easy route. Every approach demands technical mastery over steep ice, exposed rock, and climbing through the Bottleneck, a narrow couloir beneath a massive hanging glacier that has killed more climbers than any other single location on K2. One of K2's most tragic episodes happened in 1986. That summer, British climber Alan Rouse was among several elite mountaineers attempting the summit. Rouse was one of Britain's best high-altitude mountaineers. On August 4th, he and several others reached the summit in deteriorating weather. As they tried to get back to safety, they were trapped by a massive storm that lasted for days. The climbers huddled in tents at Camp 4 at around 8,000 meters, completely cut off. They had limited food, limited fuel, and were slowly dying from altitude, cold, and exhaustion. Rescue was impossible. One by one, climbers began to die. Alan Rouse held on longer than most, but on August 10th, he died in his tent. He was one of 5 climbers killed in what became known as the K2 tragedy of 1986. The mountain had trapped elite climbers and simply waited for them to die. But K2's deadliest single day came 22 years later, on August 1st, 2008. That day became known as the K2 disaster, one of the worst tragedies in mountaineering history. August 1st started as a day of triumph. After days of waiting for weather, multiple expedition teams made a coordinated push for the summit. By afternoon, more than 20 climbers had reached the top, one of the largest single-day summits in K2's history. Gerard MacDonald from Ireland had climbed extensively in the Himalayas. Hugues Daubared, a 61-year-old French climber, had summited several 8,000-meter peaks. Rolf Bay, a Norwegian climber, summited alongside his wife, fellow mountaineer Cecilia Skog. But as climbers began their descent in the late afternoon, everything went wrong. The bottleneck became a fatal trap. Fixed ropes were damaged or missing. Climbers were moving slowly, creating dangerous bottlenecks directly beneath a massive hanging serac. And then, just after nightfall, the serac collapsed. Tons of ice crashed down through the bottleneck, destroying the fixed ropes and sweeping climbers off the mountain. Rolf Bay was killed instantly, falling to his death as his wife watched from below. In the chaos that followed, climbers became separated, disoriented, and stranded. Gerard MacDonald was last seen trying to help rescue trapped teammates. He was found dead the next day. Hugues Daubared disappeared high on the mountain and was never seen again. Jumik Bodhi, a Nepalese Sherpa with extensive Himalayan experience, died trying to rescue others. By the time the storm cleared and survivors made it down, 11 climbers were dead. It was the deadliest single event in K2's history. The 2008 disaster exposed a brutal truth. Even perfect weather can turn deadly in seconds, and when things go wrong at 8,000 meters, there is often no rescue, no second chance. Number 1. Mount Everest, where legends fall. Mount Everest, at 8,849 meters, is the tallest mountain on Earth. It's also the most climbed 8,000-meter peak, with more than 11,000 successful summits. Its fatality rate, around 3%, is relatively low compared to mountains like K2 or Annapurna. But that percentage represents more than 300 dead climbers, and among those deaths are some that fundamentally changed the sport. The most significant happened in 1996, during what became the deadliest season in Everest's modern history. On May 10th, 2 commercial expeditions, led by experienced guides Rob Hall and Scott Fischer, were pushing for the summit in questionable weather. Rob Hall, a New Zealander, had summited Everest 5 times and guided dozens of clients to the top. Scott Fischer, an American, was known for his raw strength and infectious optimism. But on May 10th, everything fell apart. The weather turned catastrophic. A sudden storm trapped climbers high on the mountain, deep within the death zone. Multiple climbers became disoriented, exhausted, and unable to descend. Rob Hall stayed with a struggling client, Doug Hansen, at the summit ridge, refusing to leave him behind. By radio, Hall's team begged him to descend and save himself. He refused. Rob Hall died on the south summit, his body found months later, frozen in place. Scott Fischer, who had been feeling ill before the summit push, collapsed on the way down. His climbing partner tried to help him, but Fischer was too weak to move. He died high on the mountain, his body exposed to the elements. In total, 8 climbers died that day. The 1996 disaster became the subject of books, documentaries, and intense debate. The deaths of Hall and Fischer revealed something crucial about Everest. The mountain has become so commercialized, so crowded, that even the best guides can be put in impossible situations, managing inexperienced clients while making split-second decisions. And Everest continues, killing. In 2019, British climber Robin Haynes Fisher died descending from the summit after posting on social media about overcrowding. In 2023, Nepali guide Tenzin Sherpa, who had summited 17 8,000ers, went missing high on the mountain and was presumed dead. So what do these mountains teach us? That mountains don't care about your resume. They don't care that you've summited Everest 5 times or climbed K2 without oxygen. They don't care about your training, your equipment, or your reputation. Mountains operate on their own terms, following rules of physics, weather, and geology that humans can't control. An avalanche doesn't check your credentials before it buries you. A storm doesn't spare elite climbers. And when you're at 8,000 meters, slowly dying from lack of oxygen, it doesn't matter how many mountains you've climbed before. All that matters is whether you can take the next step down. Reinhold Messner, who survived Nanga Parbat but lost his brother there, once said that mountains are not stadiums where heroism is played out. They're cathedrals where people come to find themselves and sometimes lose themselves. The climbers we've talked about today weren't reckless. They weren't stupid. They were among the best mountaineers who ever lived. They died because mountains exist in a realm where human skill and preparation can only get you so far. Beyond that, you're at the mercy of forces completely beyond your control. And that's what makes these deaths so haunting. These climbers knew the risks. They'd seen friends die. They'd narrowly escaped death themselves. They kept going back because something about the mountains called to them, something worth risking everything for. Nanga Parbat, Annapurna, K2, Everest. These aren't just mountains, they're testing grounds for human limits, and the climbers who die there aren't failures. They're proof that some limits exist not to be broken, but to be respected. So which of these mountains scares you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this video powerful, hit the like button, subscribe, and join me next time as we explore more stories about the places on Earth where humans face their ultimate limits. Thanks for watching.